This is another edition of the Workers' Party's Call the Doctor, regular Sunday evening discussion about all matters to do with the National Health Service. Our usual resident expert is Dr. Bob Gill, who produced the great NHS heist a few years ago, which talks about the attacks on our National Health Service. But unfortunately, he's got another engagement this evening and can't be with us. However, we have a very able substitute in the form of Mary Whitby, who's active with the Merseyside Pensioners Organisation, who've done a hell of a lot of campaigning on a range of different issues, including the National Health Service, and one of which was the concern about the Americanisation of the National Health Service and the downskilling of staff. I wonder whether, Mary, we could maybe start there. Welcome to this X Space. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for bearing with us for those technical difficulties. But just start with that, will you? Because that was quite an important campaign, I think, or quite an important protest. I don't know if you've done any others. I saw this from a while ago. I think it was last year, the ones I'm looking at on my screen now. But just tell us about the protest and what precipitated it.
So, well, the Labour government in 2003 introduced physician assistants back then, and they've been growing this workforce ever since. And I think since 2015-16, they've had lots of university courses, increasing the workforce. And they were going to push legislation through Parliament very quickly via a statutory instrument with hardly any scrutiny or debate. And so we tried to raise awareness of that to stop them retrospectively legalising physician assistants and changing the name to physician associates. So it was physician assistants, physician associates and anaesthetist associates were the subject of this statutory instrument. And so we went outside the Spine in Liverpool, which is one of the offices of the Royal College of Physicians, the Northern Office, in I think the December possibly, and we protested outside. But then we went to London in January and February and April, I think, and we went to the House of Lords where they were discussing it, and I think a handful of Lords turned up, and but we were there. It happened to coincide as well with the doctor strike, so they came and joined us too. So we had our banners and our placards, and then we at various occasions we went to London. We went outside the Royal College of Physicians, the Royal College of GPs, the Royal College of Nursing, various Royal Colleges, the GMC. And protested outside. Really, we were trying to raise awareness. We were trying to build some opposition in the staff, in the workers, as well as the public, to try to stop them legalising these doctor replacements. I mean, it's really dangerous. They do like a two-year course, mostly online, and no one ever fails the course. So it can't be that rigorous. No one ever fails, 100% pass rate. So, and they're putting them in, they're going to let them put you under an anaesthetic and be responsible for your life in the richest country in the world in the 21st century.
It's absolutely outrageous. But Mary, I mean, you said that you had done this protest as well as outside the hospital and so on. You've been down to Parliament and you were lobbying the House of Lords, and you said that a number of the peers came and spoke to you. What was the reaction of peers to the protest that or indeed the lobby that you were engaged with in terms of raising this concern about this move?
Oh, we didn't actually see any peers. They didn't come out and talk to us. We were just talking to the public. And then a journalist turned up, and it actually, I think it got into the Daily Mail as well as the sorry, my phone's just gone off. It got in the Daily Mail as well as the Morning Star. But I mean, we did that protest through Merseyside Pensioners Association, which fights for pensioners and the generations coming after us. And, we remember what the NHS was, what it should be, what it can be. And we have to fight to get that back for our children and grandchildren and the future generations. So that's why we did it last year and tried to raise as much awareness, but it got rushed through, hardly any debate, hardly any scrutiny. That's the problem with statutory instruments, isn't it?
So, although you've attempted then to lobby Parliament, these parliamentarians are supposed to be there to represent us, they didn't engage with you then?
No, they didn't come out to see us or anything. When we went outside some of the royal colleges, some of the, the general secretaries or the chief, whatever they call them, they would come out and say hello and send us out cups of tea. But we'd talk to the doctors going in. We'd go on days where they were having a particular meeting and a special, an extraordinary general meeting they were having at one point to discuss physician associates. The trouble is, I think that the leadership, successive leaderships, like the successive governments, like successive leaderships of royal colleges and of unions, unfortunately, have waved it through over the decades. And so it's not just happened overnight. It's not, it's not just something that's just happened now.
No, I mean, I think the changes to the National Health Service, the damaging changes which have been implemented have been ongoing, haven't they, for the best part of 50 years, if truth be told. I mean, when Margaret Thatcher came in 1979, of course, with the neoliberal revolution, which was really started, in fact, by the previous Labour government under Jim Callaghan and Dennis Healey, when Harold Wilson stepped down. But then we've seen various iterations, haven't we? We've spoken a little bit about this in previous episodes of this X space. But how wide spread do you think is the awareness, in your experience, Mary, of the wider general public? I mean, obviously you and the Merseyside Pensioners Group, take a very keen interest in this, and you try to raise awareness amongst the wider general public and really set the standard, I think. I mean, everybody could do with following, I think, the lead of the Merseyside Pensioners Organisation, a really inspirational group. But what sort of reaction do you get from the public, when you're doing these protests? I mean, how aware are they, and how, if they're not aware, how surprised are they about some of the horror stories that I guess you're telling them about? And I mean, and do they believe you? I mean, what sort of reaction are you getting?
I think when we do those protests, people do believe us because they have got, I think the problem is people are experiencing the lack of care, the denial of care, but they don't know why. The media tells them loads of propaganda. It's bed blocking, it's aging population, it's pensioners, it's immigrants, it's COVID, we can't afford the NHS. And, I know you talk about, modern monetary theory and how the economy works, and it's all rubbish. But that's all that people get fed all the time. But every direction it's coming at them. If you listen to the radio all day, you get it on every bulletin. It's we can't afford this, we can't afford that. So they don't necessarily know why they can't get a doctor's appointment, why they can't get a scan, why 7.6 million people are on waiting lists. And the biggest propaganda is that it's immigrants and people on small boats, and that's the reason. But then, when you actually do get to have a conversation with people, they do actually understand. They do know it's being privatized. And I think it's that thing with, they say that Bevan said that the NHS will last as long as good people have the will to fight for it. And I think it's that problem that no one has mobilized people. No one's agitated them. No one has educated and said, listen, this is the issue. This is the truth. No one's ever asked us to vote for this. Like you say, 50 years of restructuring. And we've never once been asked to vote for any of this. That it's completely unauthorized restructuring of our health service. And even Tory voters support a publicly provided health service. So but none of us have ever been asked to vote on that. And politicians stand there with hospitals behind them telling us how much they love the NHS and they'd never privatise the NHS and continue to wave it through. I mean, at the moment, there's another huge restructuring. The next stage of it is making thousands of staff redundant in NHS England and in integrated care boards because they've served their purpose. You don't need them anymore. We've moved on now to mega trusts, who are going to control everything, and they're effectively accountable care organisations, which is an American model. It's an American financial accounting model. So it's about finances and accountancy. It's not about accountability. It's not about care. even though they're called accountable care organisations. It's about being able to run a whole system.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think.
Can I just let you know, Chris, we have got somebody who's requested to speak, Irene Leonard.
Okay, then, yeah, Irene, yeah, you come in now then, Irene. Can you hear us, Irene? You have the floor. You need to unmute yourself, I think.
Yeah, you muted, Irene. Okay, maybe not then. Okay, carry on.
Oh, hi.
Oh, there she is, sorry.
Hi, Irene. Yeah, sorry, we're having lots of technical problems tonight. But yeah, go ahead, Irene. What did you want to say?
Well, I really welcome your show and Mary's contribution. And I agree that I actually hadn't requested to speak.
Okay. Then we thought you had.
Having worked in the NHS for all my life until I retired, and watched it being privatised from within by Stealth, and the effect it has on staff and patients and services. By the time I retired, people were saying, "I don't know what my job is anymore." And we had I was in a community mental health crisis team, and we had nowhere to refer patients to. In the past, we've been part of multidisciplinary teams, and we would discuss comprehensively the needs of the patient and their family and dependents. And we would have a host of agencies to contact and professional people, all of whom would provide a safety net for everybody and the people. That's been totally taken away. And now we just have individuals and their families presenting, and a very myopic examination of their situation related more to what the service will consider providing, rather than what does the patient and the family need.
Yes.
This is the list of options. Take it or leave it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. But anyway.
No, that's a really good point, Irene. And perhaps I could maybe ask you to develop it a little bit more, because I mean, there's one thing, isn't it, making sure that the NHS is properly structured, properly resourced. I mean, one of the points that Dr. Bob Gill makes is that it's not simply a question of more money. Obviously, making sure people are properly remunerated or things like that is important, clearly, and ensuring that the NHS has the resources necessary to provide a comprehensive service. But Bob's point is that a lot of money is really just being siphoned off. It's being sucked out of the National Health Service into the coffers of the private sector, these private sector spivs that are actually, preying on the National Health Service. And he said, if all we did was to throw more money at the National Health Service, it wouldn't solve the problem. It would just make, bigger profits, really, for the privateers. But the point I was going to ask you to develop a little bit more, Irene, is that point you made about the multidisciplinary teams that you used to work with. Okay. It's not simply, is it, about, as I was saying at the beginning,
not at all.
Properly resourcing the National Health Service. It's about making sure that there is a comprehensive system in place in terms of housing, social services, and all sorts of other support mechanisms over and above the National Health Service. That's my feeling. I mean, what's your thoughts as a former NHS professional yourself?
Okay, I'll try and keep it brief, because I was trying to listen. Okay, so the GP is key. And the GP's position has been eroded, we know, and is now under greater threat. You can't have a GP attached to a business-based service provider. That isn't medicine. That's like a shop. That's not what you need. So the GP provided the continuity and the knowledge of the patient in the community and family settings, and was the link to all the other services, the hospitals and everything else. Without that, you just have a person, more and more now, turning up with some symptoms, as Mary said, with physician associates, may or not be recognised, and their significance may or may not be recognised, because it's just like walking into a train station and asking for a ticket, or it's not medicine. Medicine is the connection between the physician the services, the family situation. So in the old MDT team, which recognized that the importance of a person in their life, you would have social workers, housing, pharmacy, all of whom would come together and discuss the needs of the presenting needs of that patient, and may have different views, but those views would come together to form an individualized care program. That is something that I think I've made up now. It sounds so remote from what happens now with CBT online, physio online, anything that they can package into an algorithm or a software program. One size fits all. So
they're making great play, aren't they, Irene and Mary? I don't know what your thoughts are on this as well about so-called technology-driven improvements. They're saying that AI is going to increase productivity and provide more alleged choice for patients. I mean, how do you respond to that, Irene? And Mary, get your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I mean, it's the usual, presentation of a bad product in some finer clothes. Like the words are fine, but the actual content is poor and actually dangerous. As Mary said, it's dangerous. We have so many people who are mistakenly diagnosed, late diagnosis. We're in a very, very critical position, and the joys and the beauty of working in health. I always thought that medicine and medics were the finest of the professions because they saved lives. You know, we've got lawyers and accountants, all very, very skilled, architects, all very skilled. But in medicine, this team worked together to save and improve a life. And what it's been reduced to now to a series of technicians of limited ability dishing out over-the-counter remedies from a small tick box is dangerous, horrifying, and sad.
No, indeed. Sad. I guess you would agree with that, Mary. What Irene was saying there.
Yeah, I think it's part of it. So they try to break it down like it's a machine or a business, and you just can't do that with the health service or with bodies and human beings. And so it's the taskification. So they've got all these members of staff who are just trained to do small bits. It's a bit like a production line. You can do the bit that you've been trained on, but you don't know how that interacts with the other bits. You don't know. You can't spot if something goes wrong. They think that if anyone could do it, you could just feed a bit of information into an algorithm, into a computer, and it's going to spit out the answer and it's going to be correct. But there's the times when those things are wrong, and it depends on the information you put in as to what you get out as well. And it's really dangerous. I mean, we have seen people have died because of not being able to see real doctors or thinking they've seen real doctors and they haven't. And then that's with real people, and AI is just a machine. It's just doesn't think for itself, does it? So it is really dangerous.
What can we do then, do you think, Mary, one of the things that Bob's been very passionate about and frustrated really is the inability so far of being able to build an unstoppable mass movement to resist this demolition really of the National Health Service. It's so important. I mean, Bob cites the example of the protests the mass protests that succeeded in stopping Premier League football teams from creating this Super League, if you remember. And whilst, I know Bill Shankly said, football's not a matter of life and death, it's more important than that. It's relevant, obviously, to the Merseyside pensioners group in that sense. But, the health service is pretty important, I would say, at least on a par with football, if not more so. So, what can we do? What do we need to do to build this mass movement? Because, it is literally a matter, is it not, of life and death?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we did try to get local MPs to take up the issue at the football matches, because you've got all those football fans, and we went outside the Everton, Liverpool, Tranmere Rovers, and we leafleted and spoke to fans. And we tried to get the local MPs to take that on, because if they can make up chants and banners for the Super League, they could have done it for the NHS. They could have mobilised football fans, but they didn't. And, you know, I think it's that thing I said earlier on about Bevan, it'll last as long as good people will fight for it. But they need to know they've lost it. They need to understand it. What we've got now is a logo with multiple systems, Americanized systems, and myriad providers, from companies to CICs to charities to all voluntary groups, faith group, all these providers, all with admin and bureaucracy and all ticket, and also useful stakeholders when they tick boxes for engagements and consultations. But you know, we need to mobilize people. We need them to understand they've lost the NHS, because you're not going to fight for something if you don't know you've lost it. No. And I think that, and also we need to, you know, just signing a petition here and there and sitting back again going, oh, well, I'm all right then, I've signed a petition, it's okay. People need to do more than that if they can. And they need to talk to their friends and family and work colleagues. And, you know, it was like, if you hear different people talking about it, you might not get it. And then another person talks about it, light bulb moment goes on in your head, which is what happened when I heard Bob Gill speak in 2017. I knew they were privatising the NHS. I just didn't understand how they were doing it. And I went to a Defend Our NHS Wirral meeting where Bob was speaking, and it was like a light bulb going off in my head. That's how you're doing it, you know. So I think the more people can talk about it in spaces like this, you know, where someone might get it a bit more when Irene speaks or you speak or I speak, or, you know, it's just different ways, different language, you use different ways to explain it. But we really, and you know, we need to put pressure on our unions. You know, I tried through Unite Community, and I said to someone, well, you know, we need to, I said, well, why aren't the unions fighting for the NHS? I just don't get it. And someone said to me, oh, well, they're only as good as their members. And I went, oh, so it's the members' fault. And I said, okay, then we need to educate why aren't we educating the members? And I said, and they said, I said, well, then as members, we need to tell them what we want. And they went, oh no, they wouldn't like that. so you know, both ways around. And it was very difficult. And you know, that they signed up to this social partnership forum in 2006 that Patricia Hewitt started, and they're still in it now. They renewed it a few years ago, and that was to smooth this transition to these American systems. So I think we need to educate and agitate trade unionists to put pressure on their unions to stop cooperating with the reorganization, and just speak as many in as many places as we can about it, to try and cut through the propaganda about, you know, we can't afford it, or it's old people bed blocking, or it's immigrants, or it's, you know, COVID. This was going on long before COVID. And during the lockdown, Simon Stevens, who was brought from United Health of America to run NHS England, actually wrote to all the trusts and the ICS, the integrated care boards, to say to them, we need to lock in the benefits of COVID, because they've managed, they planned to cut face-to-face appointments by 50%, and they thought it was going to take them 5 years. Because none of this is accidental. This isn't Streeting not knowing what he's doing. It doesn't matter who's health secretary. The policy never changes. It doesn't matter you change the face or the colour of the rosette, or it's the same policy for decades. And they've managed to basically cut face-to-face appointments by 100% within months, really. And they were slapping themselves on the back, saying we need to lock in the benefits while the bodies were piling high, the benefits of COVID. So, and now, you know, they say, oh, well, we can't treat people because of COVID. But even at that point, that before COVID, there were 4 million people on waiting lists. So those waiting lists have been deliberately created. We can't afford the NHS, and we can't, you know, we just don't have politicians with the will to provide it.
No. I mean, you mentioned the trade unions, and you know, just talking about Bob Gill's, you know, ideal of a mass movement. I mean, there is a potential mass movement. I know the trade union movement is not as big as it was in the heyday of the 1970s, when there were, I think, 13 going on 14 million people who were members of trade unions. But it's still, what, 6 or 7 million people. I mean, if we could mobilise, a good proportion of them, so the trade union could really play a really crucial role, couldn't they? And that would be an unstoppable, if you could mobilise millions of people, I think that would be an unstoppable force, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, you couldn't have even have done a lot of the restructuring if the unions hadn't allowed it. Say, like in the miners' strike, they brought in scab workforces. They're doing it in the bin strikes in Birmingham. And they're now going on strike. The agency workers are now going on strike. Yeah. Well, you couldn't have brought in a whole new workforce of physician associates, anaesthetist associates, midwife associates, nursing associates, without the cooperation of the unions. You couldn't just suddenly bring this workforce in one day and go, listen, these are all just coming in to work here. They'd have gone, wait a minute, how does this affect our existing members and workers? And where are they going to fit, and who's going to pay them, and where's the funding coming? That can't happen overnight. That's taken years of cooperation.
So, but the trade unions are supposed to be well, indeed, not supposed to be. They are democratic bodies, aren't they? I mean, this is the leadership, isn't it? I think, which is, not picking up the cudgels in the way in which they should do, not picking up the cudgels that I think Anar and Bevan would want to see them doing. When, as you say, said, the NHS will survive for as long as there's folk willing to fight for it. I mean, and for goodness sake, the establishment of the National Health Service is probably the proudest and most significant achievement, isn't it, of the Labour movement. So the Labour movement really has an obligation, doesn't it, to fight for it, to actually honour, what Anar and Bevan said. So what can we do you think, Mary, to, make these democratic organisations actually do their bloody job and stand up for what is one of the most important, if not the most important, institution for working class communities in this country?
Well, we have to hold them to account. I'm not quite sure how you do it, but we have to hold them. I think we have to agitate the members. We have to somehow get to the members, educate them, and get them to put pressure on their unions to say, this isn't good enough. Our workers can't go to work because they can't get a doctor's appointment and they're sick. That it affects the workforce if you can't work, or they can't go to work because their children are sick, or their grandma's sick. And there's no carers, there's no support network in place. And they can't go to work. So it always round it affects the members of trade unions, whether it's the worker themselves, whether it's the workplace they work in the NHS, or whether it's their families and their communities. I'm just at a loss, really, though, how we do that.
Well, I mean, I think it's up to all of us, each and every one of us, as members of trade unions. We can play our part in, raising these matters, I guess, at branch meetings and pushing for resolutions to go to the annual conference of the trade unions, and just keep agitating and pushing. I mean, every act of resistance is important, even though it might feel insignificant. I think, when we stand and make a stand, it does have an influence. I mean, what we're doing tonight, will hopefully, influence people and empower them to go on. And, from small acorns, giant oak trees grow, don't they? And, so I do think there is the real potential there. And I think if we could just get people to understand really, what's at stake here, what the threat that they are actually facing really is. I mean, and because one of the things which is difficult is that, like you mentioned, Mary, the propaganda in terms of what is put out there. I mean, the likes of Wes Streeting is like crowing about the fact he's claiming that the NHS waiting lists are tumbling, they're coming down, and everything's all rosy in the garden. I mean, what do you make of these claims from the government and from the Health Secretary?
Well, it's a drop in the ocean. If you're one of the over 7 million people who've been sat on interminable waiting lists, it doesn't help to say, we've brought it down by 200,000. But they've also paid, GPs different. They've paid hospitals. They've paid them to slim down their waiting list. So that doesn't necessarily mean 200,000 people got the treatment they needed. It doesn't mean that they got the medication or the scan or got to see a consultant that they needed in a timely manner. It could just mean that they've kicked people off waiting lists and given financial incentives to providers to kick people off waiting lists. So I think, you know, the NHS was the greatest leveler, wasn't it? It didn't matter your wealth, your postcode. We had publicly provided services that were universally available, and it didn't matter where you took sick. If you were on holiday, if you were at work, if you were visiting some other part of the country, you got treated the same. Now we've with these separate systems they've created, these feudal states. We've got. If you take ill in one of those, they can turn you away and say you don't live here. You're from a different postcode. Go away. We don't cover people from that postcode. That's the American system right here in the UK, and that was happening in Greater Manchester years ago. In Andy Burnham's patch, a retired nurse was scalded all down her body with hot water. She went to 2 hospitals and was turned away, saying she lived in the wrong postcode. So they've got staff now who, I'm not criticising staff, but the staff that she happened to see are willing to see a person standing in front of them covered in scalds and go, I mean, that's a bit like America, isn't it? The next thing would be, where's your credit card? It doesn't matter that you're covered in scalds. Go away because you're not from the right postcode. That's shocking. That's not what the NHS was. We had rising life expectancy, better health, better conditions. People were able to live longer, and it's actually fallen now. And excess deaths has gone up as well. So you've got more people dying than you did 5 years ago, and life expectancy has fallen, and people live more years in ill health than they used to as well.
Isn't it curious? That's a really important point I think you're making there, Mary, because one of the things that the government's talking about now in their so-called 10-year plan for the NHS is sickness prevention, and yet they seem to be pursuing a policy agenda which is actually exacerbating the likelihood of people falling sick. And you just talked about the impact of these national policies, which is leading to people's life expectancy falling and people living longer in ill health, not living a long and healthy life, but actually, experiencing ill health. I mean, how are we getting away with this sort of, nonsense, this sort of propaganda that, we're so in favour of the National Health Service, and we're committed to sickness prevention. On the one hand, they're claiming that, but at the same time, the pursuing policies was actually doing the opposite, isn't it? I mean, am I getting it wrong?
Yeah. No, it is. It's double speak, and they abuse the English language all the time. It's like saying accountable care organisations. There's nothing to do with accountability or care. They say one thing and do another, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they're backed up by the media. They haven't got any big organisations like unions or Royal Colleges stopping them. Even the Royal College of GPs said there was no role for physician associates in GP practices, but they're still carrying on, creating training courses and things for them and accrediting them. And so unless we do something, they're just going to carry on, because we can tut and we can huff and puff and say it's terrible, it's awful, isn't it awful? But unless we actually turn up outside their doors and protest like we did I know we didn't stop it, but we did raise a lot of awareness, I think. I think we actually have to do something directly, action, obviously peaceful action, to raise awareness, because people are just not getting the message. I think people are so busy keeping their heads above water, they're just seeing headlines, and the headlines are misleading. And obviously, it's a billionaire media press, isn't it? So that's all people see if they read papers at all or see the news at all these days. I think there is a, I don't know whether people just haven't got the time to devote to looking at why things are happening.
Well, What do you think George Orwell would make of all this doublespeak?
Well, he must be thinking, well, it was very prescient, wasn't it? He predicted a lot of this, didn't he? It's shocking. It terrifies me. It really, really does scare me. And then you've got the assisted dying on top. So take away all your benefits, your welfare state, all the things that we rely on to live. Take away your health service. And it's back to Bevan. Bevan created the NHS to take away the fear of getting sick. We're back to actually being scared of getting ill again, I think, a lot of people.
Indeed.
Because you just think, the care won't be there for me when I need it. And the only thing they're dangling in front of you is state murder.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And the tragedy is, isn't it, Mary, that a lot of people across the country, working class communities and so on, are really frustrated about the state of the country, what's happening to public services and so on, and are erroneously turning to Reform UK. And Reform UK, I mean, are a turbocharged Thatcherite tribute act, aren't they? I mean, they don't offer any answers. They will just make matters worse, won't they?
They will, but they are actually talking about the issues, aren't they? They're talking about the things that people are experiencing, whereas Labour and all the others are not, and so that they're picking up people who are desperate, talking about the issues that affect real people in real everyday lives, but their solutions are not. It's as much doublespeak, because they have no intention of providing a fully funded, fully publicly provided health service either. It's well known that Farage favours an insurance, an Americanised system. He's been over to America enough times. But if you are really busy, working all the time, trying to pay extortionate rent or mortgages, trying to keep your kids, you haven't got time to read into stuff. So, that's going to appeal to you, isn't it? Someone saying to you, oh, this is terrible. We feel your pain and we know what you're going through, and this is the reason. And so people are being fed the propaganda as to look over there, not look up there at the people making the decisions and the reasons why people are struggling. That while the bankers are making their billions again. We're always being diverted and divided all the time, aren't we? Because it works.
Well, divide and rule. So, the British Empire was the most successful empire in the history of the human race, and the thing that they mastered was divide and rule, wasn't it? And that's what they're doing.
And it worked. And they do it in the NHS. They'll set, you'll get headlines about these lazy GPs. So they're sending patients against GPs, GPs against patients, doctors against nurses, PAs, doctors against PAs, always round. We're all being told. And I think that's, the doctors are fighting for pay because they've had an effective pay cut for a decade, below inflation, either frozen or below inflation pay rises. And I think it amounted to up to 30% cuts, really. And, you've got a first-year doctor starting on a really low wage, and they're only asking to phase it up to 22,000 to start on after 5 or 6 years and hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of debt. Sorry, I can't remember where I was going with that, but it's,
well, I think that's another valid point, though, Mary, because it's not just about the fact that the doctors and all workers, for that matter, they've fallen behind in real terms with regard to their wages. But when we're talking about such a crucial service as that, there does need to be an incentive to continue renewing, the professionals, as it were, to attract people in, because I mean, I don't know what the figures are, but I think we're running significant vacancy rates in the National Health Service. And if people, maybe not doctors, but certainly, nurses and others, if they could get same amount of money or maybe even a bit more for a less demanding job, then, some people are going to make that choice. And so I think it's important. I mean, it's not just a selfish thing from the point of view of the doctors. I don't think they're being selfish in any way, shape or form, but it's also, investing in the future, isn't it? To give people that recognition, and, youngsters leaving university or whatever, school, to look to the medical profession as a lucrative, career potentially. And, if they feel that they're being devalued, well, that's just going to be a disincentive, isn't it, to and put them off and maybe use their talents elsewhere, and that's going to then have an impact on us, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think this August, 20,000 doctors were facing unemployment. You've got doctors doing courier work, you've taxis, working in supermarkets, and it's not that they don't want to work, they do, and it's not that there's the government's spin is that there's a doctor shortage. There isn't a doctor shortage. There's a shortage of jobs available for doctors because they're filling these jobs with non-doctors. And personally, I want to see a real doctor. I don't want to see someone who's barely trained. It's dangerous. You wouldn't get in a plane and have the pilot on the ground floor supervising the cabin crew up in the air, telling them how to fly the plane. I want the real doctor working, I want the real pilot flying my plane, and I want the real doctor, the real anaesthetist, looking after me when I'm ill. And they are deliberately driving them out, I think. And I actually think, I think that we should be scrapping tuition fees for everyone. Not
yes,
just
of course.
NHS workers.
Yeah, for sure.
It does make you wonder how Boris Johnson and two of his siblings all got means-tested grants to go to Oxford. All three of them. And yet there were people in my comprehensive school who were, whose dads did ordinary jobs and were told that their dads earned too much to be able to get a means-tested grant. So we need to go back to valuing workers, valuing education, and in a wealthy country, we can afford,
of course, we can,
to educate people, to educate all our young people, and to not leave them in massive debt from.
It's an absolute scandal, an outrage, totally unjustifiable. I mean, and as you say, Mary, in a country which is the 6th biggest economy in the world, to have 15 million people living in poverty, to have low pay endemic throughout the land, low pay insecure employment endemic throughout the land, to be treating our health professionals and other public service officials, teachers and social workers, etc., so offhandedly in that sense, it's just so wrong. And then you look to our infrastructure, the state of our housing, it's all falling to pieces, and there's no justification for that. And then the country, as wealthy as Britain is, a country that issues its own currency, to go on about the MMT understanding of how the monetary system works, literally no justification for any of this. We could have the best public services in the world, the best infrastructure in the world. We have the ability to do that. We have the money, to do that. The only thing that we might be a bit short of is the real resources in the economy. Have we got the skilled workers? Have we got the materials, the machinery, and the rest of it? That's where the focus should be on. And all this bullshit that we're leading up to the budget this week, the financial black hole and all this crap about the bond market, etc. I mean, the bond market, they make out as if they're all powerful. They're not at all. They're reliant on the government. We don't need to sell bonds. It's not debt either. They've got about, government debt getting out of hand. It's not even debt. They're selling these oligarchs and faceless corporations a cast iron guaranteed return on their investment, but they don't need to do it to resource government spending. And that's a message I think it's really important to get out there to people as well. But just in conclusion, Mary, because we've been going for about 3/4 of an hour now, and I'd just like to get your thoughts on another topic. I see that you're wearing a Palestinian keffiyeh there, and we're seeing, aren't we, doctors, medical professionals being targeted for speaking out against genocide and for criticizing the genocidal, illegitimate Israeli state. I prefer to call it the Zionist entity. I mean, highly professional, dedicated doctors and nurses and so on being targeted in this way, having their career turned upside down, their life turned upside down. I mean, that's yet another outrage, isn't it? I mean, we'll just say a few words about that, because I can, obviously you've be passionate about the Palestinian cause, because you've come on the show this evening, wearing a keffiyeh. So just tell us what your thoughts are on that.
I think, well, yeah, I mean, we saw how anti-Semitism was weaponized in the Labour Party. You know, lots of us got, you famously were expelled, and we all, you know, I was too, for liking a page on Facebook. So it's an attack on freedom of speech. It's an attack on our right to protest. And, you know, we've got members of Merseyside Pensioners Association, pensioners and pensioners all over the country being arrested for holding up pieces of paper with words on that seem to be more threatening than actual bombs and bullets, apparently. You know, it's, I think that they are losing control of that narrative, though. I think that more people are realizing that, you know, what they see in the media is complete fabrication. A lot of the time it's again all, well, it's turned on its head, isn't it? You know, the language they use, the refusal to say who killed the Palestinians, who targeted them, and then to always show Israel as the victim. And I think we just need more and more people to well, the more people speak out, the safer it is for everyone to.
That's true.
They can't pick people off it as easily when there's a mass of people all speaking out.
Although
I think we need more.
Absolutely, although doctors are still being targeted. I mean, and Irene, when she spoke, made the point that, in her opinion, the medical profession, medical professionals are sort of, if you like, at the pinnacle of all the professions. I mean, every profession, I think she mentioned, lawyers and teachers, etc., all very highly skilled people. But, from her perspective, and I think a lot of people would agree with her, that, that medical profession is probably at the pinnacle. And yet these people that are at that pinnacle of performing, life-saving operations and so on are being suspended. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that there's a shortage, etc., and we've got this waiting list and so on. And then to dispense with medical professionals, with doctors, for speaking out against genocide, again, going back to George Orwell, I mean, I think he'd probably have to do a rewrite of 1984, because this is even worse. Well, I think he was even, sort of predicting it when he wrote that tome all those years ago.
They've been taken to to employment tribunals. They're being held, people making complaints about them, and then them having to face tribunals, get through that tribunal, then another complaint facing another tribunal. But then we also see Dr. Chris Day has spent years fighting as a whistleblower, and I think he's actually finally come to the end of that now. And the NHS as an organisation is gaslighting its own members. And that they use the phrase "be kind," but that's usually to shut you up, shut you down, stop you from speaking. And it's flipping it on its head, saying you're not being kind, or you're being mean, you're picking on people just for having an opinion. And these you don't own these workers. Have paid for their own training, their own, they've paid for 5-6 years and beyond, because they carry on having to pay for their training beyond when they become a doctor. And you're telling them they're not allowed to speak, have an opinion, have a free speech outside of work. They can't, they don't own us. I think they seem to think that we're some kind of vassal state where they can control every part of our lives, and you're not allowed to have an opinion and do whatever you like in your own free time. And when it's not, you can't control it. Might have been one thing at one time when the NHS paid for all your training, paid for your accommodation. Bob talks about when there was accommodation. The nurses talk about they were provided with uniforms and places, nurses' accommodation. All that, they don't provide any of that anymore. So they can't control people. It's not like they go, well, we've paid for all this, so we want you to work for us for so many years. They're not paying for it anymore. So that it's it's an attack on democracy, an attack on freedom of speech, and it's happening all over. It's happening in all different places in our lives and sectors.
I tell you what, if we're going to have concerns, in my opinion, Mary, it's not about people, compassionate people who are performing life-saving operations and providing medical care, life-saving medical care for people who have an aversion, as all right-minded, decent people should have, to the abuses of the Zionist entity, their opposition to a genocide. That shouldn't be a cause for concern, but it seems in the perverse world occupied by the present government, and indeed all the political class, that is their concern. And yet British citizens can travel from this country, participate in that genocide, and come back to this country and carry on their day job with impunity, including in the National Health Service, in colleges or wherever. What kind of topsy-turvy world are we living in when that is the way in which the government goes on? I mean, it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
It is unbelievable. It's like we've gone through the looking glass, and up is down and left is right, and we don't, despite the fact there's 65 million of us, we don't seem to realise our power. Because we need to stop accepting this and stop putting up with it, and mobilise to it is outrageous when you look at the war crimes after the war, pursuing war criminals, that people can go out and then come back and I should say work in the NHS as doctors, and yet other workers just for expressing an opinion on Palestine, and protesting that hundreds of health workers in Palestine have been deliberately targeted, along with journalists and aid workers and children, babies and children. Nothing can ever be the same again after this. We cannot. You can't get over this. You just can't.
No.
It's shocking.
Well, listen, despite all of the...
Chris, we've got a speaker. We've
got
have we?
Az. Right, okay,
I don't want to butcher
Who is it?
Surname.
Who is it?
Az Madu. I really don't want to butcher his surname.
Oh, okay, mate, get on. Is it Az? Then go on, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Peace to the room. It's wonderful that you're having this conversation. For my part, I'm a resident. I'm born and raised here in London, in the UK. My family are from West Africa.
Right.
I've got friends in China. I've got friends in Venezuela. I've got friends who are Ukrainian, and I've got Palestinian friends. So all of these issues, which we can all point to all at once, Venezuelans are about to be invaded by the empire of the United States. In China, they're facing probably the same thing. In Nigeria, where my parents are from, again, we can understand the same thing is being talked about because of allegedly a genocide of Christians. Well, everybody's being murdered in that country. Here in the UK, people rightly outraged about what we're being forced to witness. This is the first time in our history that we've seen a live stream genocide. I mean, I'm a historian by study, and when you read what I've read, what I'm seeing, although it's galling, it's unsurprising to me, because this is probably what the Native American faced.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So none of this should be shocking anybody, not really, when you understand the imperative of capitalism as the fundamental basis for all of this. Cecil Rhodes said this.
Yes.
He said, in order to be good colonialists, to stave off civil war here in the UK, we must be good imperialists.
Yes.
All these massive corporations have got more wealth than countries, and then you've got a few people who own more wealth than half of planet Earth.
Yeah.
This inequity is the cause of this problem.
Yeah.
And when these corporations, you talk about trying to bring back jobs to this country. Well, my simple question is, why? The deindustrialization of this country, the companies that owned all of the resources, where did they go? They went to Africa, they went to Asia, and land was cheap, so they bought it all up. And then they employed people in these countries, paying them pennies.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why they're going to bring back any industrialization back to the UK. Of course, the infrastructure, it has to crumble, because there's no profit to be made from maintaining the infrastructure. There's no profit made. This is why everything has to be nationalized. That means the NHS has to be nationalized. All of the privatization forced out. Water companies, national. I was on the phone with my water company for over an hour.
Really?
My water bill, probably like most of you guys here, has gone up 30%.
Yeah.
My wages haven't gone up 30%.
No, of course not.
And the guy told me the reason it's gone up 30% by Ofcom is so that the water company couldn't put it up 100%.
Yeah.
We all know that what they're doing is pumping effluent into our rivers. They paid their stockholders all of the dividends and then impoverish the working people. This cannot be allowed to continue. So unless we all with one collective voice say, nationalize the rail, nationalize the utilities, nationalize the NHS, and I would add into that the legal profession, because if you have to go to court, it only favors those with deep pockets, and that's not everybody. That's just, again, a few people. So until we do something like that, there's no point complaining. I really have to be brutally honest. My parents came here to this country because of what Pope Nicholas V did in the 14th century. We're English speakers.
Yes.
So this is a long end of the result of, excuse me, colonial expansion. Now the working people in this country are now feeling some of what other people could have told them about a long time. We haven't averted this catastrophe.
No.
And if we don't do something, ordinary people, we don't even talk about Sudan.
No.
For what's going on in Sudan is even worse than what's going in Gaza. And we don't do Oppression Olympics. None of this should be happening, but it is. And this, for me, as an African man, is so reprehensible that the politicians in this country will sit down and rub their hands saying, we don't know what to do. But look over there, small migrants coming in a boat are the cause of all concerns. Well, you bombed them out of their country.
Exactly. Very well.
You can't.
Very well said. I completely agree with everything you've said, and I'll get Mary's thoughts as well in a moment. But you're absolutely right, and that final point I think is particularly well made. And you know, the Reform UK in particular, who are othering the migrants, as it were, and yet they support the policies that actually drive people to desperation. You know, the arms sales to despotic regimes, the economic sanctions that impoverish populations, the imperialist wars. You know, these are what actually drive the sort of migration flows that they claim to be concerned about. And you're absolutely right as well in relation to we can't rely on the private sector to create a good society. It's just not going to happen. They're prime overarching priority is on making profit, is on making money. Indeed, they have a fiduciary duty as directors of companies to, return a profit, as it were. And that should have no place, in my opinion, in delivering public services, because public services should be entirely devoted to delivering public service, not private profit. But we've been going in the opposite direction for getting on for 50 years now, ever since, well, not just Thatcher, it really started, as I've already said, under Jim Callaghan and Dennis Healey, but she put turbochargers on it. And then Tony Blair, when he got elected as a Labour Prime Minister, said his job wasn't to tear down Margaret Thatcher's achievements, as he put it, but was to build upon them. And this has been the problem, that we've had a sort of a consensus, a neoliberal warmongering consensus, in Labour or Conservative, whichever way, and Liberal Democrats, all the political class sitting in the House of Commons are basically all singing from the same hymn sheet. And we need a completely new script, as you are setting out as in your very eloquent contribution there. And that is absolutely the way. And, the opportunity to create a good society is not it's not a figment of my imagination. It's not an unachievable goal. It's there for the taking. And we could actually be a force for good in the world, because the world is bountiful. Nobody in the world, I talked about nobody in this country should be living in poverty, and nobody in the world should be living in poverty, and particularly in Africa, with its mineral and resource rich continent. And when leaders in the African continent have come to the fore, people like Patrice Lumumba and others, of course, subsequently after him, and have talked about African unity and using the riches that Africa has for the benefits of the African people, of course, we know what's happened to them, and we know who's been responsible for that. And
Chris, do you think people really know?
Second, sorry.
Do you think people actually know what happened to Patrice Lumumba?
Well, a lot of people won't know. I was saying,
And this is the problem.
That follow these things closely know, but a lot of people won't know in that sense. And there are many others
and
as well. I mean,
it's incumbent upon us to tell people
yes,
what
I agree.
happened to the first Prime Minister of Congo, assassinated after 12 weeks of office. And then in 2022, this is 1961, he was assassinated. Then in 2022, the Belgian government returned to his family a velvet box. Inside was his tooth.
Yes, indeed.
And people have to ask the question,
Indeed.
his tooth, what happened to his body? Well, H2SO4 is the chemical compound for sulfuric acid, which is what they used to dissolve him with.
Yes.
As a human being,
as
an African man,
I
can never forgive anybody for that.
No, of course not. Barbarian. I mean, really barbarians.
And this is still going on today. It hasn't stopped with Lumumba, Sankara, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Walter Rodney was a historian. The list, and all of these African men I just mentioned, when none of them saw their 40th birthday. So this is not an accident. None of this is an accident. So we need people to stand up. They need to know the history so that they can act, because this is impacting their lives here in the UK today in 2025, just as well as it's still affecting African people. My cousins are still in Africa. It's still impacting them because of the massive extraction of following on from the enslavement and then the neo-colonization. You guys know. So, we need to tell people the history so they understand the root causes of all of this. Then they will know what to do. It won't be a surprise when the British people suddenly stand up and one go, all right, today's the day we're not going to take this bullshit no more. That's what we need them to all do with one voice. Stand up together. No more. The wealthy people just sit down and be quiet. Ordinary people are going to determine the outcome for their own lives and not to be abused by this system called capitalism.
Well, as we have an opportunity, I think, with the emergence of a new party on the left, and the hopeful then the ability to reach some sort of electoral agreement with other, progressively minded parties. And let's focus on where we agree on the sort of points that I think you were talking about, bringing important public services and so on into public ownership, nationalisation, etc. And if we can focus on those areas where we agree on creating a good society at home, ending imperialist wars overseas, and the arms sales and sanctions, etc., which are used to oppress people all over the world, then I think we've got a chance, really, of making a real difference and actually getting people with that mindset, into positions of power. But we need to mobilise people, as you say. And one of the duties, I think, of the labour movement in particular, I'm talking the trade unions, but also any new emerging left alliance, if it can come to fruition, I hope it can, is to educate, like you said, to raise political consciousness, to tell people about the history and so on. Because people, I think, when they realise the reality of the horrors, the barbaric activities of these Western leaders, they, I think, would be absolutely appalled, and I think that would, help us to mobilise and to win over support to create that good society at home and a fairer world overseas. But final word to you, Mary, before we close today.
So thanks, Taz. I was going to say that it comes down to education, doesn't it? And, knowing our history and knowing learning economics. And I think we should all be taught that. It's got proper, not the Thatcherite myth. Not the Thatcherite myth of the household budget, but the economics. I mean, we've had 500 years of making the same demands, and the wealth and the power and the land has stayed in the same hands for all those centuries. And we keep we keep doing the same thing, expecting something different. We have this boom and bust cycle that we've had for centuries. We had this small window of time where post-war we created the welfare state. We had good health, good housing. We even had legal aid, didn't we? For people to get justice.
Yeah.
But that has, for over 50 years, has been getting dismantled because they didn't want us to have those things. And we had that wonderful time, with dentists and everything. I mean, good luck finding a dentist. I do have an NHS dentist, thankfully. But so we have this cycle of boom and bust, which transfers wealth up. We have this neoliberal talk about trickle down, but it never trickles down. It defies gravity and it always goes upwards.
Yes, indeed.
So
economic osmosis, I think.
they persuade you to buy council houses, then they take them off you again, and they end up in the hands of, you know, big business. And it happens, you know, 1989, there was no global banking crash, but we had another recession, which I always think didn't impact here, Liverpool, as badly as the one at the beginning of the 80s, because we hadn't recovered from that one, and we were in managed decline by Thatcher anyway. So, but in London, you had this boom of people buying, you know, broom cupboards, and then ending up with 15% interest rates, and then everything crashed, and they all lost those houses, and that property ended up back in the hands of wealthy people. So each time they do this, they transfer the wealth back again. So they let you get into debt, and then they take it away. So, you know, they've been dismantling our NHS, our welfare state ever since. And we need to do something different, because we keep doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome, and it's not going to happen.
No, indeed.
And, you know, they rewrote the curriculum when the Tories were in, didn't they? Gove rewrote the curriculum about the history of World War One and things like that. So we need other ways of educating people, because the state system isn't, you know, while the neoliberals are in control of it, is not going to teach us our own history and teach us about economics, and show us how to challenge that system. And tinkering at the edges, you know, saying, oh, we just need a bit more money for the NHS, and that's not going to work. As Bob said, that money just goes into the pockets of Virgin Care and Spire and United Health and Optum, and they go, thank you very much, we'll have that money, but it doesn't get you any better services, it doesn't get you any more doctors. So I think we need to start doing something different, and mobilizing the potential of the population. Just how you do that.
Well, unity is strength is the old Labour movement maxim, and we need to you know, put that into practice. Thanks very much indeed, Mary. I think we'll draw it to a close there now. You've been an admirable stand-in for Dr. Bob Gill. Thank you very much indeed for stepping into the breach at the last moment. I think we've had a really interesting discussion tonight, actually, a wide-ranging discussion. We sort of slightly strayed outside of, strictly speaking, you know, NHS, but I think that was right and proper and interesting, and we've had some great contributions from the floor. So thanks very much indeed for stimulating that, Mary. It's been really, really good, and I appreciate your time, and thanks everybody for listening in, and we'll be back next week at the same time. Hopefully we won't have the technical difficulties. We always seem to have some technical difficulties, but anyway, bear with us. We managed to get going a little bit later than what we'd anticipated tonight, but we will be back, all being well, at 5 o'clock next Sunday with Dr. Bob Gill. So thanks again, Mary. Thanks everybody for watching, and good night.